Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got some absolutely insane Am I the Bad Person stories that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about family boundaries and relationships. Before we get started, I asked you guys to help me hit 100 subscribers. And just looking at it now, we are about to hit 500 just a day after we hit 100. Just wow. I cannot thank all of you enough for the support on the channel. It seriously means more than you know. Your comments really leave an impact. Thank you. Anyways, grab your favourite snack, settle in, and let's get into these stories that honestly sound too crazy to be real. But here we are. My parents kept my inheritance and gave it to my brother, so I exposed their golden child at his wedding. I'm 28, and my brother Derek is 25. We've always had what you'd call a complicated relationship growing up. It was pretty obvious that Derek was the favourite. He could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one, the one who helped out, the one who never caused problems. When our grandmother passed away 3 years ago, she left a substantial inheritance to both Derek and me equally. According to her will, each of us was supposed to receive $75,000. The thing is, my parents were the executors of the will, and they told me that grandmother had changed her mind before she died. They said she decided Derek needed the money more than I did, since he was still figuring out his life. While I had a stable job and was doing well for myself, they showed me what looked like an updated will that gave Derek the full $150,000. While I got nothing, I was devastated, but I trusted my parents. They said grandmother felt bad, that Derek had struggled more in school and wanted to give him a head start in life. It hurt, but I accepted it. I even helped Derek celebrate when he got the money, watching him buy a new car and put a down payment on a house, while I kept renting and driving my beat-up Honda. Last month, Derek got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Sarah, and my parents went all out planning this massive wedding. They kept talking about how proud they were that Derek was finally settling down, and how grandmother would have been so happy to see him succeed. I was happy for him too, despite everything, but something felt off about the whole situation 2 weeks before the wedding. I was helping my mum organise some paperwork in Dad's office, when I found a folder labelled estate documents. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was the real will. Grandmother's actual will, dated just 1 month before she died, and it was exactly what I remembered. Both Derek and I were supposed to get $75,000 each. There was no updated will, no change of heart, just my parents deciding that Derek deserved more, and I deserved nothing. They had forged the document they showed me, and kept my inheritance for themselves. Well, technically, they gave it all to Derek, but the point was they stole from me and lied about it for 3 years. I sat in that office staring at the real will, feeling like my entire world had shifted. Everything I thought I knew about my family was wrong. They had looked me in the eye and lied. They had watched me struggle financially, while Derek lived it up with money that was partially mine. They had let me believe that my own grandmother thought I was worth nothing. I made copies of everything and went home to think I could have confronted them. Privately, could have demanded my money back and left it at that, but something inside me was done. Being the quiet, responsible one who always took the high road, they had humiliated me for years, made me feel less than. And now I knew it was all based on lies. Derek's wedding was held at a beautiful venue with about 200 guests during the reception. After dinner, there's always that moment where family members give toasts. My parents had already spoken, talking about how proud they were of Derek and how he'd grown into such a responsible young man. Then Derek stood up to thank everyone. That's when I stood up too. I asked for the microphone and Derek handed it over with a smile, thinking I was just going to give a sweet brotherly toast instead. I pulled out the copies of the real will and began reading it aloud. Word for word, the room went dead silent as I explained how our grandmother had left us equal inheritances and how my parents had decided Derek deserved it all. I read the dates, I showed the differences between the real will and the fake one they had created. I watched my parents' faces turn white as I laid out exactly how they had stolen my inheritance and given it to their golden child. Derek looked confused at first, then horrified, as he realised what this meant. Sarah was mortified, the guests were whispering and gasping. My parents tried to interrupt, tried to say I was lying, but I had the documents right there in black and white. I ended by saying, "Congratulations, Derek, on your wedding and on the house and car you bought with my money. I hope it was worth it." Then I handed back the microphone and walked out of the reception. The fallout was immediate. Derek called me that night, crying, saying he had no idea and that he'd pay me back. My parents sent angry texts calling me selfish and saying I had ruined Derek's special day. Other family members started reaching out, some supporting me, others saying I should have handled it privately. Derek did try to make things right. He sold the car and took out a loan to pay me back. The $75,000 I was owed plus interest, my parents on the other hand doubled down. They said they had done what was best for the family and that I was being vindictive. I don't regret what I did. They stole from me and lied about it for years. They let me believe my grandmother didn't love me equally. They watched me struggle while Derek lived off money that was partially mine. If they wanted to keep it private, they should have been honest from the beginning. That's the end of that story. And honestly, I'm team poster on this one. Like stealing someone's inheritance and then gaslighting them about it for 3 years. That's next level manipulation. The wedding toast was definitely dramatic, but sometimes the truth needs a spotlight. Let's move on to our next story, because this one's about to make you question everything. You know about workplace boundaries. I reported my co-worker for harassment after she kept trying to set me up with her daughter. I work at a mid-sized accounting firm, and I've been there for about 4 years. I'm 29, single, and generally keep my personal life pretty separate from work. I'm friendly with my co-workers, but I don't really socialise outside the office or share much about my dating life. About 6 months ago, we hired a new senior accountant named Linda. She's in her 50s, really nice, and competent at her job. We got along well professionally, and she seemed like a good addition to the team. The problem started about 2 months after she was hired, when she began asking personal questions about my relationship status. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She'd ask if I was seeing anyone, or if I had plans for the weekend when I mentioned I was single. She got this look in her eye like she'd just solved a puzzle. She started talking about her daughter Jessica, who was also single, and around my age she showed me pictures and talked about how smart and beautiful Jessica was. I politely deflected these conversations and tried to steer things back to work topics. But Linda was persistent. She'd bring up Jessica, constantly talking about her job, her hobbies, her personality. She'd mention how Jessica was looking for a nice guy, and how she thought we'd be perfect together. Things escalated when Linda started leaving Jessica's social media profiles open on her computer. When I'd walk by her desk, she'd call me over to show me Jessica's latest photos or posts. She'd say things like, "Look how pretty she looks in this dress," or "She just got promoted at her marketing job. Isn't that impressive?" I tried to be clear that I wasn't interested in being set up. I told Linda that I preferred to meet people naturally and that I didn't really date people. Through family connections, she seemed to take this as a challenge rather than a boundary. Linda started inviting me to family events. She'd say things like, "We're having a barbecue this weekend. You should come. Jessica will be there." Or "Jessica and I are going to that new restaurant downtown. You should join us." I always declined, but she kept asking. The situation got really uncomfortable when Linda started bringing Jessica to work, events she'd invite her to office, happy hours, company picnics, and holiday parties. Jessica seemed nice enough, but it was obvious that Linda was orchestrating these encounters. She'd seat us together at dinner or suggest we share an Uber home. I started avoiding office social events, which wasn't great for my career, but I felt trapped. Linda would corner me at these events and basically force interactions with Jessica. She'd disappear conveniently, leaving us alone together, or she'd bring up conversation topics that she thought would interest both of us. Things reached a breaking point last month when Linda gave Jessica my personal phone number. Without asking, Jessica started texting me. asking if I wanted to grab coffee or see a movie. I was polite but firm in declining, but then Linda started asking me why I wasn't responding to Jessica's messages. Linda began making comments about my dating life in front of other co-workers. She'd say things like, "I don't understand why you're still single. Jessica is such a catch," or "maybe you're just too picky." She started speculating about my sexuality, suggesting that maybe I wasn't interested in women at all. The final straw came when Linda scheduled a fake work meeting. She sent me a calendar invite for a client consultation at a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, Jessica was there instead. Linda had set up an ambush date. She told Jessica it was a casual meetup and told me it was work-related. I left immediately and went straight to HR the next morning. I filed a formal complaint explaining the months of harassment, the boundary violations, and the fake meeting setup. I provided documentation, including the calendar invite and screenshots of Jessica's texts that I'd received after Linda gave out my number. HR took it seriously. They interviewed Linda and several co-workers who had witnessed her behaviour. Linda was given a formal warning and told to cease all personal matchmaking activities. She was also required to attend sensitivity training about workplace boundaries. Linda was furious. She accused me of overreacting and said she was just trying to be nice. She claimed that her intentions were good and that I was being ungrateful for her attempts to help my love life. Some of my co-workers think I should have just talked to Linda directly before involving HR. But here's the thing, I did try to set boundaries multiple times. I was clear that I wasn't interested, and she ignored every signal I gave her. She violated my privacy by sharing my contact information. She created uncomfortable situations at work, and she manipulated both Jessica and me with the fake meeting. Linda still works here, but she barely speaks to me now, which honestly is a relief. Jessica sent me an apologetic text saying she had no idea her mum was being so pushy and that she was embarrassed by the whole situation. I appreciated that and told her no hard feelings, since she wasn't the one crossing boundaries. I don't regret reporting Linda. Some people say I should have handled it differently, but months of increasingly invasive behaviour and the final ambush meeting crossed every professional line. There is workplace harassment, doesn't have to be romantic or sexual, to be inappropriate and harmful. That story is absolutely wild, and honestly, reporting Linda was the right call. Like, imagine thinking you can orchestrate someone's entire love life at work. The fake meeting setup was basically workplace catfishing. Our next story is going to make you rethink everything about family loyalty. I cut off my sister's wedding funding after she uninvited me for being gay. I'm 32 and my sister Emma is 27. We've always been close, or at least I thought we were. I came out to my family when I was 25, and while it took some adjustment, everyone seemed to accept it. My parents were supportive, and Emma always said she loved me, no matter what. Emma got engaged last year to her boyfriend Marcus, who I'd met a few times. He seemed nice enough. Though we never really clicked, Emma was over the moon, planning this huge wedding she'd dreamed about since we were kids. She wanted everything perfect, the dress, the venue, the flowers, the whole fairy tale. Here's where it gets complicated. I'm pretty well off financially. I work in tech, and I've been lucky with some investments. Emma, on the other hand, works as a teacher, and Marcus is still finishing grad school. They don't have much money for the kind of wedding Emma wanted when Emma first got engaged. She came to me crying about how she couldn't afford her dream wedding. She showed me all these Pinterest boards and magazine clippings of what she wanted. It was going to cost at least $40,000, which was way beyond their budget. I offered to pay for the entire wedding. As my gift to her, I told her I wanted her to have everything she'd dreamed of, and that money wasn't an issue for me. Emma was so grateful. She hugged me and cried, saying I was the best brother in the world, and how lucky she was to have me. We spent months planning together. I paid deposits for the venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, everything. Emma would run every decision by me since I was footing the bill, and I was happy to be so involved in making her day special. She kept saying how perfect everything was going to be. about 3 months before the wedding. Emma called me, sounding nervous. She said she needed to talk to me about something important when we met for coffee. She looked uncomfortable and kept fidgeting with her engagement ring. She told me that Marcus had been having second thoughts about some of the wedding guest list, specifically about me bringing my boyfriend David to the wedding. Emma said Marcus came from a very traditional religious family, and that having an openly gay couple at the wedding might make his relatives uncomfortable. I was confused because this had never been an issue before. David had been to family events, and everyone seemed fine with him. Emma quickly said that she still loved and accepted me, but that maybe it would be better if I came to the wedding alone, just this once, for the sake of keeping peace with Marcus's family. I told her that was ridiculous. David and I had been together for 3 years. He was part of my life. And if I was paying for this wedding, he was definitely invited. Emma got defensive, saying it wasn't about me being gay. It was about not wanting drama on her wedding day. I asked her point blank if she was uninviting David, and she hesitated before saying, "Yes, just David, not me." She said I could still come and still be in the wedding party. She just thought it would be easier if David stayed home. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach here. I was paying for her entire dream wedding, and she was asking me to hide part of who I am, to make her fiancé's homophobic relatives comfortable. I told her that if David wasn't welcome, then neither was I. Emma panicked and said I was being dramatic, that it was just one day and couldn't I just compromise for her sake. She said she'd already put deposits down and that everything was planned around me being there. I told her she had a choice. She could have the wedding with both David and me there, or she could have the wedding without either of us, but she couldn't have it both ways. Emma chose Marcus's family's comfort over her own brother. I pulled all funding immediately. I called every vendor and cancelled the contracts that were in my name. I got refunds where possible and lost the deposits where I couldn't. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photography, all of it gone. Emma called me sobbing, saying I was ruining her life and that she couldn't afford to replace everything on such short notice. I told her she should have thought about that before she decided her brother's relationship wasn't worth defending. Marcus called me an unreasonable jerk and said I was holding the wedding hostage over political correctness. My parents got involved trying to mediate, but I was done. Emma had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Emma ended up having a much smaller wedding at a community centre, with basic catering and a friend taking photos. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd planned, but it was what she could afford without my help. Some family members think I overreacted, that I should have just gone alone to keep the peace, but I refused to go back in the closet for anyone's comfort, not even my sister's. Emma made a choice between supporting me and appeasing homophobes. She chose wrong. We barely speak. Now, Emma sent me a card on my birthday, but that's about it. Our relationship may never recover, but I don't regret standing up for myself. And for David, some boundaries can't be crossed even by family. That story hits hard because it's about so much more than just a wedding invitation. It's about choosing between family loyalty and personal dignity. Sometimes standing up for yourself means losing people. You Love, our next story, takes workplace drama to a whole new level. My boss fired me for refusing to work on my wedding day, so I cost him his biggest client. I worked as a project manager at a small marketing agency for 3 years. My boss, Kevin, was one of those entrepreneurs who thought owning a business meant he owned his employees too. He had no concept of work-life balance and expected everyone to be available. 24/7, I got engaged to my boyfriend Tom 2 years ago, and we'd been planning our wedding for over a year. We set the date for a Saturday in October, and I'd requested that weekend off 8 months in advance. Kevin approved the time off, and everything was set. The week before my wedding, Kevin landed what he called the biggest client in the company's history. Some tech startup that wanted a complete rebrand and marketing strategy. It was worth about $200,000, which was huge for our little agency. Kevin was over the moon about this client, but then he found out they wanted to have a kick-off meeting the Saturday of my wedding. He came to me on Wednesday and said I needed to cancel my honeymoon and work that weekend. Instead, I reminded him that I'd had this time off approved for 8 months and that I was getting married in 3 days. Kevin said the client was more important than my personal life, and that if I was really committed to the company, I'd make the sacrifice. I told him absolutely not, that I wasn't cancelling my wedding for a work meeting. Kevin got furious and said I was being selfish and unprofessional. He threatened to fire me if I didn't show up Saturday morning. I stood my ground and told him to fire me then, because I wasn't missing my own wedding. Kevin called my bluff and handed me a termination letter right there on Wednesday afternoon. 3 days before my wedding, I was devastated, not just about losing my job, but about the timing. Tom and I had been counting on my salary for our honeymoon and to get settled as newlyweds, but I wasn't about to let Kevin ruin our special day. Here's where it gets interesting. I knew this client really well because I'd been the one doing all the preliminary work with them for weeks. I'd built a relationship with their marketing director, Sarah, and she trusted my judgment on their project. On Thursday, I decided to call Sarah and let her know I wouldn't be working on her account anymore. I explained that I'd been fired for refusing to work on my wedding day. Sarah was shocked. She said she had no idea. Kevin expected me to work that weekend. Sarah asked me a lot of questions about how Kevin ran the business, and I was honest about his management style, his unrealistic expectations, and his tendency to overwork employees. She seemed really concerned about what kind of partnership they were getting into. I didn't badmouth Kevin directly. I just answered her questions truthfully about what it was like to work there and how he treated his staff. Sarah thanked me for my honesty and congratulated me on my upcoming wedding. My wedding day was perfect. Tom and I had an amazing ceremony and reception surrounded by family and friends. I didn't think about work at all until Monday, when Kevin started blowing up my phone with angry voicemails. Apparently, the client meeting had been a disaster. Kevin showed up unprepared because he didn't know any of the details I'd been handling. Sarah asked pointed questions about employee treatment and company culture that Kevin couldn't answer well. By Monday afternoon, Sarah had pulled the contract. She told Kevin that after speaking with former employees, she didn't feel comfortable working with someone who fired people for not working on their wedding day. Kevin lost the biggest client in company history, and apparently several other employees quit after hearing about what happened to me. The agency's reputation took a huge hit and Kevin had to lay off half his remaining staff. Kevin kept calling me, begging me to call Sarah and fix things. He offered me my job back with a raise and promised better work-life balance. I told him I wasn't interested and that he'd made his choice when he fired me. Tom and I used our honeymoon time to job hunt instead, and I found a much better position at a larger agency with actual HR policies and respect for employees. Kevin's business is still struggling, and he's had to take on freelance work just to keep the doors open. Some people think I was vindictive for talking to Sarah, but I just answered her questions, honestly. Kevin created this situation by prioritizing a client meeting over basic human decency. If he'd respected my time off, none of this would have happened. The whole experience taught me that some bosses will never respect boundaries unless there are consequences. Kevin learned the hard way that treating employees badly can cost you everything. This one is pure karma in action, like firing someone 3 days before their wedding for refusing to work. That's just asking for cosmic justice. Our final story today is going to leave you questioning everything about trust and friendship. My best friend slept with my fiancée, so I revealed her biggest secret at her baby shower. I'm 26, and my best friend, Rachel, is 28. We've been insanely close since college. Roommates turned sisters. Basically, we told each other everything. Shared clothes, borrowed money, celebrated every milestone together. I was her maid of honor. She was going to be mine. We had this unbreakable bond, or so I thought. I got engaged to my boyfriend Jake last spring after 3 years together. Rachel seemed thrilled. She helped me pick out my dress venue hunt, taste wedding cakes, All the best friend duties, she was so involved and supportive. I felt so lucky to have her by my side for the biggest day of my life. Jake and Rachel got along great, which I loved. They'd joke around at group hangouts and she'd text him funny memes. Sometimes I never thought anything of it because I trusted both of them completely. Rachel had been single for a while and kept saying she was focused on her career. About 2 months before my wedding, I started noticing weird little things. Jake would be on his phone more often and he'd flip it over. When I walked by, Rachel would mention things about Jake that I hadn't told her, like his work schedule or what he had for lunch, random details that seemed odd. I brushed it off as paranoia until I found Jake's second phone in his gym bag. I didn't even know he had a second phone when I turned it on. There were months of text messages between him and Rachel. Not just friendly messages, but full-blown romantic conversations, planning secret meetups, talking about their feelings for each other. The messages went back 6 months. They'd been having an affair almost since I got engaged. They talked about how guilty they felt, but how they couldn't help themselves. They made plans to meet at hotels when I was working late. They even discussed what would happen after my wedding, whether they'd keep seeing each other. I sat in my car reading these messages for 2 hours, crying so hard I could barely see the screen. My fiancé and my best friend had been betraying me for half a year, while I planned a wedding and dreamed about my future. They'd looked me in the eye and lied every single day. I confronted Jake first. He tried to deny it, then broke down and admitted everything he said. It just happened that he'd fallen for Rachel, but still loved me too. He begged me not to call off the wedding, said we could work through it, that it was just a mistake. I threw his ring at him and told him to get out. Then I called Rachel. She came over immediately, probably thinking Jake had told me, and she needed to do damage control. Instead, I handed her the phone and watched her face crumble as she realised I knew everything. Rachel cried and apologised, said it wasn't supposed to happen, that they'd tried to stop but couldn't help their feelings. She said she was planning to end it after the wedding, that she didn't want to hurt me. I told her she'd already destroyed me and our friendship was over. I called off the wedding loss deposits on everything and had to tell everyone what happened. It was humiliating, devastating, expensive. My whole life plan crumbled because the 2 people I trusted most had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But here's where it gets interesting. Rachel was pregnant. She'd been hiding it for about 3 months and hadn't told anyone yet, except Jake, apparently. The baby was Jake's, which explained why their affair had gotten so intense so quickly. Rachel was terrified about being a single mum. She'd built her whole identity around her career and wasn't ready for a baby. She was also scared about telling her very conservative religious parents, who would be horrified about her having a baby out of wedlock. About 6 months later, Rachel's family threw her a baby shower. They invited me, which was awkward, but I guess they thought enough time had passed that we'd made up. I almost didn't go, but something made me change my mind at the shower. Rachel was glowing in a pink dress, opening presents and accepting congratulations from all her family and church friends. Everyone kept talking about how excited they were to meet the baby and asking about the father. Rachel had been telling everyone that the father was some guy she'd dated briefly, who wasn't in the picture anymore. She said he'd moved away for work, and they decided it was better if he wasn't involved. It was a complete lie, but everyone believed it. When it came time for speeches, Rachel's mum stood up and talked about how proud she was of Rachel for handling single motherhood with such grace and dignity. She said Rachel was setting a wonderful example of Christian values and putting the baby first. That's when I stood up. I asked if I could say something and Rachel's face went white. She knew exactly what I was thinking, but couldn't stop me without making a scene. I walked to the front of the room and smiled at all the guests. I said I wanted to share how Rachel and I became so close and how she'd been there for me during my engagement. I talked about what a good friend she'd been, helping me plan my wedding and spending so much time with my fiancé Jake, getting to know him really well. Then I said, unfortunately, Rachel got to know Jake a little too well. In fact, they got to know each other intimately for months while I was planning to marry him. The baby Rachel's carrying is actually my ex-fiance's child, conceived during their affair. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Rachel started crying and tried to say I was lying, but I pulled out printed screenshots of their text messages. I read a few of the more romantic ones aloud, including one where Jake talked about hoping the baby would have Rachel's eyes. Rachel's mum fainted. Her dad started yelling, asking if it was true. Rachel broke down and admitted everything through tears. The guests were horrified. Some left immediately. Others stayed to comfort Rachel's parents, who were completely devastated. I calmly gathered my purse and coat and walked out, leaving Rachel to deal with the fallout she'd created. The affair had consequences, and now everyone knew the truth about her perfect single mum story. Rachel texted me later, calling me vindictive and cruel, saying I'd destroyed her relationship with her family over something that was already in the past. I told her she'd destroyed my life first and that their actions have consequences. Her parents ended up kicking her out temporarily until she could prove she was committed to raising the child properly. Jake stepped up, and they're trying to co-parent now, but it's messy and complicated exactly what they deserved. Some people think I went too far, that I should have let sleeping dogs lie, but Rachel built her whole redemption story on lies she let her family praise her for, values she'd completely abandoned while betraying me. If she wanted privacy, she shouldn't have invited me to watch her accept praise for being someone she wasn't. That story is absolutely savage, but honestly, Rachel had it coming. Like the audacity to invite your ex-best friend to your baby shower after stealing her fiancé is just mind-blowing. Sometimes the truth needs to come out in the most public way possible. Let's move on to our next story, because this one involves some serious workplace revenge. My co-worker stole my promotion, so I exposed her fake degree. I work in marketing at a decent-sized company, and I've been there for 4 years. I'm 29, and I've worked really hard to move up the ladder. I started as an assistant and slowly earned more responsibilities, better projects, and the respect of my colleagues. Last year, a senior marketing manager position opened up. It was exactly what I'd been working toward for years. The role involved managing a team, overseeing major campaigns, and working directly with clients. It came with a significant salary bump and would have been a huge career milestone for me. I applied immediately and felt confident about my chances. I had the experience, the relationships, and the track record. My boss even hinted that I was the front runner for the position. I started mentally planning how I'd restructure some of our processes and which team members I'd want to work with about a week. After I applied, a new woman named Sandra joined our department as a marketing specialist. She was around my age, very polished and confident. She mentioned having an MBA from a prestigious university and extensive experience at top firms. Sandra was charming and made friends quickly. She had this way of inserting herself into important conversations and meetings. Even though she was new, she'd offer opinions on strategies and processes, acting like she had years of experience at our company. Within her first month, Sandra somehow found out about the senior manager position. Even though it hadn't been posted externally, she went straight to our director and expressed interest in applying. The director was impressed by her credentials and agreed to consider her. I was shocked. Sandra had been at the company for 4 weeks and was already trying to leapfrog over people who'd been there for years, but I tried to stay professional and focus on my own qualifications during the interview process. The interviews went well for me. I felt like I articulated my vision clearly and demonstrated my knowledge of our clients and processes. But Sandra was also interviewing and apparently making quite an impression with her MBA credentials. An outside experience. 2 weeks later, they announced that Sandra got the promotion. I was devastated. 4 years of hard work and loyalty meant nothing compared to her fancy degree and smooth talking. I felt like I'd been completely overlooked despite my proven track record. Sandra immediately started making changes to processes I'd developed. She took credit for campaigns I'd been working on for months and began treating me like I was beneath her, even though we'd been peers just weeks earlier. I tried to be gracious about the whole thing, but it ate at me every day, watching Sandra in the role I'd earned, while she acted like she'd always belonged there. She'd make comments about bringing fresh perspectives and modern approaches, as if everyone else was outdated about 3 months into Sandra's tenure. I was working late one night and needed to print something from her computer. She'd left it unlocked, which wasn't unusual in our office. I went to print my document and accidentally clicked on her personal email folder. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were emails between Sandra and someone who appeared to be helping her create fake transcripts and diplomas. The person was asking for specific details about courses and grades to make the documents look authentic. I kept digging and found more emails discussing how to verify employment at companies that had gone out of business, so background checks would be harder. Sandra had completely fabricated her entire resume, her MBA, her previous experience. All of it was fake. I screenshot everything and spent the next few days researching Sandra's background. Sure enough, the university she claimed to attend had no record of her. The companies she listed as previous employers either didn't exist or had never heard of her. Sandra had built her entire career on lies and had stolen my promotion using fake credentials. I was furious, but I knew I had to be smart about how I handled this information. Going to HR immediately might backfire if they thought I was just bitter about not getting promoted. Instead, I decided to let Sandra dig her own grave. I started asking her specific questions about her MBA program and previous jobs, details that someone who'd actually attended or worked there would know. Sandra would give vague answers or change the subject during team meetings. I'd bring up marketing theories or strategies that someone with her supposed background should know. Sandra would nod along, but never contribute meaningful insights. She was clearly out of her depth, but trying to fake it. After a few more weeks of gathering evidence, I finally went to HR with everything: the fake transcripts, the employment verification emails, the inconsistencies in her stories. HR launched an immediate investigation. It didn't take long for them to confirm what I'd found. Sandra's entire background was fabricated. She'd never attended graduate school, never worked at the companies she claimed, and had no business being in a senior management role. Sandra was fired within the week. Security escorted her out, while she cried and tried to explain that she'd just been trying to get ahead in life. She begged them not to press charges, but the company decided to pursue fraud charges. Anyway, the director who'd hired Sandra was embarrassed and apologetic. He offered me the promotion immediately, with a retroactive start date and a bonus to make up for the months I'd missed out on the role. Taking over from Sandra was awkward at first because she'd made so many changes based on nothing but inexperience and fake confidence. I had to undo a lot of her decisions and rebuild relationships with clients she'd confused or alienated. Some people in the office whispered that I'd been vindictive in exposing Sandra, but I didn't see it that way. She'd committed fraud or stolen my job and was actively harming our department with her incompetence. Someone had to speak up. Sandra tried to contact me on social media months later, asking me to give her a reference for other jobs. She said everyone deserved a second chance and that she'd learned her lesson. I blocked her immediately. The whole experience taught me that sometimes bad people do get ahead temporarily, but the truth has a way of coming out. Sandra thought she could fake her way to success, but eventually reality caught up with her. That's some next-level workplace justice. Right there, like imagine having the nerve to fake an entire MBA and then act superior to people who actually earned their positions. Sandra got exactly what she deserved, and our poster got the promotion they'd worked for all along. Our next story is going to make you question everything about family dynamics. My brother used my identity to get a loan, so I had him arrested at Thanksgiving dinner. I'm 31 and my brother Marcus is 28. We've never been particularly close growing up. He was always the one getting into trouble, while I was the responsible older sibling who tried to set a good example. Marcus dropped out of college, got into some legal trouble, and has generally made poor life choices. About 2 years ago, I started getting calls from debt collectors asking about loans I'd never taken out. At first, I thought it was just mistaken identity or spam calls, but the details they had were too specific. They had my social security number, my address, even my employment information. I pulled my credit report and found 3 different loans, totaling about $30,000, that I definitely hadn't applied for. Someone had used my identity to get personal loans from different companies and hadn't been making payments. I immediately started the process of disputing the charges and reporting identity theft to the credit bureaus. It was a nightmare of paperwork, phone calls, and documentation. I had to prove I wasn't responsible for debts someone else had created in my name. The investigation took months, during which time my credit score plummeted. I couldn't get approved for a car loan when mine died, and I had to pay cash for a used vehicle. I couldn't refinance my mortgage to get a better rate, and I was constantly stressed about my financial reputation. Finally, the fraud investigators traced the loans back to the applications and found security camera footage from one of the lending offices. The person who'd applied for the loans. In my name was clearly visible, and it was obviously Marcus. I was shocked. Even though Marcus had made bad choices before, I never thought he'd steal from family. He'd used my personal information to get loans. He had no intention of paying back and destroyed my credit in the process. I confronted Marcus about it, and he initially denied everything. But when I told him about the security footage, he broke down and admitted it. He said he'd been desperate, needed money fast, and knew my credit was good, so he borrowed my identity. Marcus begged me not to press charges. He promised he'd pay back every penny and said he'd already learned his lesson. He claimed he was getting his life together and that involving the police would ruin everything he'd been working toward. I wanted to believe him, but $30,000 isn't pocket change, and my credit was still ruined. I told Marcus he had 30 days to start making payments and show me a concrete plan for paying everything back, or I'd have to involve law enforcement 30 days. Came and went with no payments, no plan, and barely any communication from Marcus. When I called him, he'd make excuses about waiting for a job to start through or having unexpected expenses. He clearly had no intention of taking responsibility. That's when I decided to file a police report for identity theft. The detective assigned to my case said it was one of the clearest cases he'd ever seen. The evidence was overwhelming, and Marcus had essentially confessed. When I confronted him, the detective said they'd issue a warrant for Marcus's arrest, but it might take a few weeks to process everything. Meanwhile, our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner was coming up, and Marcus would definitely be there. I didn't tell anyone in my family what was happening. I figured they'd try to talk me out of pressing charges or guilt me into handling it privately, but Marcus had stolen from me and destroyed my credit. He needed to face real consequences. Thanksgiving dinner was at my parents' house like always. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone gathered around the dinner table, sharing what they were grateful for. Marcus even gave a little speech about family being the most important thing in life, right after dinner while everyone was having dessert and coffee. 2 police officers knocked on the front door. My mum answered, and they asked if Marcus was there. When she said yes, they asked to speak with him. Marcus came to the door, and the officers immediately placed him under arrest for identity theft and fraud. They read him his rights right there in front of the entire family, while everyone watched in shock. The room erupted in chaos. My mum started crying. My dad demanded to know what was happening. Aunts and uncles were asking questions. Marcus looked at me with this expression of complete betrayal as they put him in handcuffs. I stood up and explained to everyone exactly what Marcus had done, how he'd stolen my identity, racked up $30,000 in debt, and ruined my credit. I told them I'd given him a chance to make it right, and he'd chosen to ignore his responsibilities. Some family members were supportive, saying Marcus needed to learn that actions have consequences, but others were angry with me. They said I should have handled it privately, that arresting him at Thanksgiving was cruel, and that family should stick together. My mum begged me to drop the charges. said that Marcus was finally getting his life together and that this would destroy his progress. My dad was torn between supporting me and protecting Marcus from the legal consequences I refused to back down. Marcus had made his choices when he stole my identity, and then again when he refused to take responsibility. Thanksgiving dinner was just when the consequences finally caught up with him. Marcus spent the weekend in jail before making bail. He ended up pleading guilty to avoid a trial and got 2 years probation plus restitution. He has to pay back every penny he stole, plus interest and court costs. Our relationship is obviously destroyed. Now Marcus acts like I'm the bad guy for not covering for him. Some extended family members still think I went too far, but my credit is slowly recovering, and Marcus is finally facing real consequences for his actions. The whole experience taught me that family doesn't mean you have to enable someone's bad behaviour. Marcus stole from me, and I had every right to protect myself legally, even if it meant having him arrested at Thanksgiving dinner. That story is absolutely wild, but honestly, good for the poster. Like your brother steals $30,000 and ruins your credit, then has the audacity to act like you're the villain for holding him accountable. Family, or not theft, is theft, and actions have consequences. Our final story today is about the ultimate friendship betrayal. My best friend stole my wedding ideas and used them for her own wedding a week before mine. I'm 24 and my best friend Mia is 25. We've been best friends since middle school and have always dreamed about our future weddings together. We'd spend hours looking at Pinterest boards, planning out every detail, from the flowers to the cake flavours. We even joked that we'd probably get married around the same time last year. I got engaged to my boyfriend Ryan, and Mia got engaged to her boyfriend Derek. Just 2 months later, I was so excited that we'd get to plan our weddings together and share this amazing experience as best friends. I started planning immediately and put a lot of thought into creating a unique theme. I wanted a vintage garden party vibe with dusty rose and sage green colours, antique brass accents, and lots of greenery. I found this amazing venue that was an old botanical conservatory, perfect for the aesthetic. I was going for Mia, and I would meet for coffee every week to discuss our wedding plans. I shared everything with her, my colour palette, my vendor choices, even showed her my dress when I found it. She seemed supportive and excited, always asking questions about my decisions. I had my heart set on a very specific flower arrangement design. I'd worked with the florist for weeks to create these cascading centerpieces with garden roses, eucalyptus, and trailing ivy. It was exactly the romantic, overgrown garden look I wanted about 4 months into planning. Mia told me she'd moved her wedding date up. She said Derek got an amazing job offer that required them to relocate, and they wanted to get married before the move. Her new date was exactly 1 week before mine. I thought it was weird timing, but I supported her decision. I even offered to help with last-minute planning, since she'd have less time to put everything together. Mia seemed stressed about the rush, but said she had everything under control. 2 weeks before her wedding, Mia started acting strange. She'd cancel our coffee dates and seemed evasive when I asked about her planning. She said she wanted to keep some things as a surprise and that she'd tell me all about it. After the wedding, the night before Mia's wedding, I was scrolling through social media when I saw posts from her venue setup, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Her entire wedding looked exactly like mine. The same colour scheme, the same vintage garden aesthetic, even the same antique brass details. I called Mia immediately, and she didn't answer, so I drove to her venue to see for myself. When I walked into the reception space, it was like looking at my own wedding. The centerpieces were identical to what I'd designed. The linens were the exact same dusty rose colour. Even the string lights were hung the same way. I found Mia and confronted her about copying my entire wedding design. She got defensive and said that great minds think alike, that we'd both been inspired by the same aesthetic, and it wasn't her fault. We had similar taste, but it wasn't similar taste. It was identical execution, down to the specific flowers, the exact table settings, even the same vintage books used as decoration. I'd shared photos of everything with her during our planning sessions, and she'd recreated it perfectly. Mia's wedding was beautiful, but it was painful to watch because it was supposed to be my wedding. A week later, every detail I'd carefully planned and dreamed about was happening in front of me at someone else's celebration. The worst part was that all our mutual friends were at Mia's wedding, seeing my ideas for the first time. They kept complimenting her on her amazing creativity and unique vision, not knowing that every single detail had been stolen from my plans after the wedding. I was devastated. I'd spent months creating this vision, and now it was going to look like I was the one copying Mia. When my wedding happened a week later, everyone would think I'd stolen her ideas. I considered changing everything about my wedding, but it was too late to make major changes. With a week's notice, I'd already paid deposits, and my vendors couldn't accommodate completely new designs on such short notice. My wedding ended up being beautiful, but the whole day felt tainted. People kept making comments about how similar it was to Mia's wedding the week before. Some even asked if we planned it together as some kind of theme. Mia acted like nothing had happened. She posted photos from my wedding with captions about how gorgeous it was and how happy she was to celebrate with me. The audacity was unbelievable. After both weddings were over, I cut contact with Mia completely. I couldn't maintain a friendship with someone who'd stolen my wedding and then pretended it was just a coincidence our mutual friends were confused about why we suddenly weren't speaking. Months later, I found out through other friends that Mia had been planning to copy my wedding from the beginning. She'd moved her date up specifically to have hers first, so it would look like I was the copycat. She'd manipulated the entire situation. Mia tried to reach out on my birthday with a long text about missing our friendship and not understanding why I was being so distant. I never responded because there was nothing left to say. She'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. Some people think I overreacted, that weddings are just one day, and I should have been happy for my friend. But Mia didn't just copy a few details. She stole my entire vision and executed it first to make me look like the unoriginal one. The whole experience taught me that some people will take advantage of your trust in the worst ways. Mia destroyed our friendship for a few compliments about her wedding creativity when none of it was actually hers. That's the end of that story. And wow, the level of calculated betrayal there is just staggering. Like moving up your wedding date specifically to steal your best friend's entire vision. That's some serious friendship sabotage right there. That story really shows how some people will sacrifice years of friendship for one perfect day. And that wraps up today's collection of absolutely wild Reddit drama stories, from inheritance theft at weddings to workplace harassment to identity fraud. These stories really make you appreciate the people in your life who actually have your back. If you made it this far into the video and enjoyed diving into these crazy stories with me, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and means I can keep bringing you more of this content. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.